Good evening. My name is Vince, and I'm an alcoholic. And I would like to thank you for inviting us to Rochester. Myself and the friendly girl. We're delighted to be here, and it's a great conference. You do one bang-up job, let me tell you. I mean, boy, you get escorted in with pretty girls in tuxedos. I mean, you can't beat that. Where does that happen? You know, it's great stuff. And I want to thank Mike and Kay, our wonderful hosts, who have taken such wonderful care of us since we've been here. And we didn't get to hear Scott last night, but I've heard him before, and he's terrific. And I know that you had a great evening. And yes, he's great. And I didn't get to many meetings today. I have a cold, and I don't know about you. You people have colds. I have a cold. I really do. I require comfort. Someone tell them to turn the sound down. And it will, yeah. I require care and understanding when I'm sick. I'm very sensitive, unlike most of you. And my wife, I'm glad she's with me this trip, because I don't do well alone when I don't feel well. I need someone to take care of me. And I will tell you that
wrong way.
Women have been taking care of me all my life. And you know what? It's all right with me. I don't have any problem with it. As I'm going to tell you a little bit later when you hear my story, you'll understand why. I would like to start out. There are new people here this evening. And the first thing I would like to do is welcome you to Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah. And tell you that that's where you are tonight. You're in AA. Which may or may not come as a surprise. And we are glad that you're here. And although we've never met you, or perhaps we've never met you, we know all about you. We know everything about you. We know, for example, that this has been a bad year. Things have not gone well this year, and the end result of it is, and they've gotten progressively worse since sometime around Christmas, haven't they? And here you are, you're in AA, and you'll find this, if you're anything at all like I was when I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous, this will not make a whole lot of sense to you. It's confusing, and there's not a lot of logic here. It's all a paradox. For example, you're in a room with, 800 or 900 people here, all of whom admittedly cannot manage their own lives, but will be delighted to take yours on. Hopefully, you will allow them to do that, because that seems to be the prescription in Alcoholics Anonymous, is to understand that your best judgment about you is god-awful. And that almost anybody else in this room has better judgment about what you ought to do than you do. And I hope that you're desperate enough to be at that point. You also, if you're anything at all like I was when I was new, down deep in your soul, you are utterly convinced that you are not really alcoholic, that your case is different, and you're not really like them. And I would like to tell you that if you feel that way this evening, the very fact that you feel that way means that you are precisely like us. That is almost a requirement to be here, is to be convinced that you're in the wrong place and that you don't fit, and it's all been some kind of a cosmic mistake, that you ended up, for God's sake, in AA, of all places. How in the world could that possibly happen? And I know that that's the way that I felt at my first AA meeting, which was a very long time ago now. It was in November of 1966. I know you girls are thinking, he cannot be that old. I understand. And I'm not. I was only 6 at that meeting. And it was on a Friday evening in the basement of a Presbyterian church in Long Beach, California. And the group was much like you guys. I mean, they were dressed well, and they looked good, and they smelled good, and it was a big speaker meeting, and it was exciting, and it was a big event in Long Beach. That was the thing and all of the alcoholics in the Long Beach area in California came to this meeting on Friday night. We didn't have that many meetings back then. There was not a meeting on every street corner, as though it seems as there is now 24 hours a day. And everybody got dressed up, and they showed up on Friday night. It was a social event in addition to being an AA meeting. And it was really, if you were wandering there on any given Friday night and you were to look over that room and someone were to say to you, you are in a room filled with alcoholics, can you pick them out? You wouldn't have picked anybody out, except me on that first night I was there. You would have picked me out. I had on a filthy T-shirt and a ripped pair of jeans. I had not shaved or bathed in over a week. And I'd spent the previous 5 days in the Long Beach City Jail due to a series of unfortunate circumstances that were clearly not my fault. It turns out that the police department in Long Beach, California is fascist. And they had abused my civil rights on a regular basis, it turned out, in those days. And I ended up in the Long Beach City Jail, and this was the latest of those occasions. And I ended up on that Friday night in the basement of that Presbyterian church, and I sat up against, there was a big cement wall in the back of that room, and I sat up against that wall, and I didn't know quite what to make of any of it. I should tell you from the outset, I'm Irish and I'm Catholic, and I'm from New Jersey. And you think that's funny up here in upstate New York? And I have great difficulty with people from Texas. There's a chemistry problem, I suppose. And I sat next to this guy who was about 6'5", and he had on cowboy boots and a 10-gallon hat in his lap, and his name was Tex. And Tex wanted to hep me. And that's what he said, boy, I'm going to hep you. And I remember thinking, why don't you go hep somebody else? Leave me alone. He was going to hep me. And the first thing he did was he repeated to me in rapid succession all of the cliches. And they are dreary, aren't they? I mean, if you're new. I mean, stop it. Easy does what? And he finally draped his arm around my shoulder and he said, keep it simple. I thought, I'll bet you do, Tex. I have absolutely no quarrel with that, let me tell you. And he put some pamphlets in my lap, and in those days, I don't know, even if we use that much anymore, the card with the 20 questions on it, we still do that here? Everybody comes out of the treatment community now, and they know a lot about alcoholism, and so we don't have to convince them they're alcoholic. In those days, it was old-timers spent an inordinate amount of time convincing you that you belonged here, so they gave you the test. And the test is the 20 questions that is devised by the medical schools at Johns Hopkins, and their criteria, they can determine how alcoholic you are according to them by this criteria. There are 20 questions. And the more questions you answer yes, the worse you are. The worse it gets. And the criteria is if you answer one question yes, you may have a drinking problem. Two yes, and you definitely have a drinking problem. 3 or more, and you're an alcoholic. Not a lot of room there, is there? I mean, not really. And so I took this test for Tex. And I answered about 15 or 16 of these questions, yes. I remember I answered no to the question, do you seek lower companions? I could not find any. I mean, where the hell do you go after the Long Beach City Jail? You're going to find a lower companion. It's kind of redundant, isn't it? And the meeting began, and they began precisely the way we began here this evening. They read the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you're new and you want to know what it is we have, that's what we have. That is our program. If you wish to recover here, it is required that you take them. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. The requirement for recovery is different. The requirement for recovery is you must take these 12 steps. Now, I sat in the back of that church, and I listened to those 12 steps. And I said, my God, I didn't hear anything new. I mean, good grief. This is really rather simplistic, isn't it? I mean, I'm the end product of 8 years of Dominican nuns and Jesuit priests. And I've read Aquinas and Augustine and apologetics. And this is really, I mean, insulting. I mean, if this was this ridiculous prairie Protestant simplistic crap, you must be kidding. You really must be kidding. My case is clearly different. What do they do next? Sing a hymn about bringing in the crops? I mean, this is not for me. This will not work for me. And the meeting, so on some level, some subconscious level, I dismissed these 12 steps. And the meeting began, and several people participated, and they were nice people, and they said innocuous things that were clearly inapplicable to my life, as near as I could tell. They made no sense to me. And at the end of the meeting, you call them anniversaries here. We're from California. We're more flamboyant. We call them birthdays. And what we do in Southern California is we have cakes with candles on it, and people get, I mean, it's really embarrassing, isn't it? Middle-aged people singing happy birthday to some moron who, didn't have a drink for a year, and they have a cake with a candle on it. I mean, it's like something that should take place in a mental institution. In the day room right after dance therapy, or some birthday cakes for the alcoholics, and they had a series of these imbecilic birthday parties, and the last one was for a woman who was about 110, and she apparently had been sober forever. She had a fire on top of this cake. And she got up here, and it was the question whether she would get the candles out of the pulmonary disease would get her first, but she puffed and she puffed. She finally got these candles out, and she got up here, and she said her name was Phoebe, and that she was an alcoholic. And then she said something about, did I want what she had? Not tonight, Phoebe. I don't think so. And that was my first AA meeting. And I think you could safely say that I did not have a spiritual awakening. Clearly did not have a spiritual awakening. But what happened to me was I did stay sober for the next 3 plus years. And during that period of time, I was very active in Alcoholics Anonymous. I did all of the things that you call service work now, which was make coffee and set up chairs and just busy in AA. And I socialized in AA. I had a great social network and a lot of friends. I had a sponsor. I never did anything he said, but I had a sponsor. And I did everything there was to do in Alcoholics Anonymous except one thing. I did not take these steps. And as a result, my alcoholism got worse. And it got worse while I was sober and busy, active in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I knew it was getting worse because I felt worse. My attitude was bad. I was arrogant, and I was self-serving, and I was judgmental, and I was critical. And I would watch people around me get better. And that's how. And there are people here tonight. It's exactly in that shape. I know in a meeting this big, there has to be. You've been here some appreciable length of time, and you're participating in all of the activities in Alcoholics Anonymous, but you're not involved in this program. And it makes you crazy because you watch people who are, and they get better, and you don't. And you can watch them get better. And if you're like me, you say to yourself, how does that happen? How does that happen to that jerk? I mean, what is it? Somebody sneak in here and sprinkle pixie dust on these morons, and because they get, and you know they're better. You know they're better. You know it's real. You can see it. When someone recovers here, everything changes about them. Their eyes, their persona, they have a sense of purpose. They have it. You can just feel it, and you can see it. It's perceptible. And if you're like me, I used to think you had secret meetings. Have you ever felt that way, where they met without you and shared what it really was? That's the way that I felt. Now, psychologically, I felt that way. Intellectually, that's preposterous, but that's the way that I felt. Now, on the outside, my life came together. I got a very good job. I was in the ground floor of a brand new profession in medicine. And that, I'll tell you a little bit about my background so you understand that. I'm from New Jersey, and I am the fifth child in a family of 5 children. I have 4 older sisters. And my youngest sister was 11 when I was born. My father was 50, and my mother was 45. And it was a big Irish Catholic family. And along came a boy after all these girls. The prince had arrived. I mean, I was the prince. My sisters were just, it was during the war, and they would dress me in sailor suits and soldier suits and take pictures of me saluting the flag, and they would take me on dates with them, and, it would make you throw up. They just, spoiled me. I mean, I was very indulged and very spoiled. And my father, who, he just worshipped me. He just had, here's a boy, I don't think my father said a cross word to me till the day he died. He was just so, I talk about it all the time. My earliest memories of Christmas are my father in my bedroom in the middle of the night, kneeling down beside my bed, and he would wake me up and say things like, I just saw the sleigh leave the roof. Let's go downstairs. And the entire family would go downstairs and celebrate Christmas at 3 a.m. because my father could not wait. That's it. So I was loved and nurtured and cared for. And I will say my parents died within 1 week of each other when I was 12. My father had a massive MI, a heart attack, and dropped dead. And my mother, who'd had congestive heart failure for some period of time and lung disease, she just kind of gave up, and she died a week later. And we had, it was traumatic for a 12-year-old kid. There's no question. But I surrounded by this huge family, and there was money for my education. All of that was taken care of, and these sisters just surrounded me and took care of me, and I marched on. I began to have problems in school. Now, I am a very good student. I get A's, straight A's. But I am what is known as a behavior problem. I get in trouble. And I started in trouble in grade school, and by the time I got to high school, I went to 4 different Jesuit prep schools because I was thrown out of the one I was in every year for some kind of misbehavior, or usually had something to do with alcohol. And Jesuit prep schools are populated by Irish Catholic boys. Irish Catholic boys drink alcohol all the time, whenever they can get it, at every opportunity. But we're all very smart, and so we can drink and we can get away with murder and we get good grades and we move on, except I drank a little bit more than them. I got in a little more trouble than them. So I'm always getting thrown out of school. My family gets me in another one. And by the time I'm a senior, I'm valedictorian of my class, and I'm due to give the address at graduation. The only problem is graduation is in June. In May, I got drunk and stole a priest's car and went joyriding. And the priest happened to be the prefect of discipline, which is not a good choice. And so not only did I not get to give the address at graduation, I got not to attend graduation. They told me, don't come here. We will mail you your diploma. And as a matter of fact, if we ever have a reunion, don't come. Don't come back. So I went on to college right up here in upstate New York, in Ithaca, at Cornell, and I spent every semester of undergrad school on disciplinary probation in the 60s. Do you know how difficult that was? Do you have any idea what you had to do to accomplish that? And I did. But I managed to get good grades. Don't ask me how, but I managed to get very good grades. And in my senior year, there was a fraternity party, and we ended up on a long weekend down in Manhattan with some sorority sisters and some fraternity brothers, and we got drunk and we partied and we carried on. It was just great, except I'm a blackout drinker, and I woke up and it was Thursday, and everybody had been back to school by Monday, and I was broke, and I was on 45th Street in Manhattan, and I called my family to get some money to get back to school, and they said, you know what, we're not going to indulge you anymore. Get back to school on your own. Just get back to school. And when you get back to school and show us that you're going to go ahead and do some responsible things in your life, we'll send you some money. And so I went into a rage, because this time I had a sense of entitlement that was, beyond anything you can imagine. And I went into this rage, and I got sober, and I thought I'm going to be the captain of my own ship. I'm tired of other people determining my life. I'm going to take my life in my hands. So I went and I joined the Navy. I left an Ivy League university in the second semester of my senior year with a 3.8 GPA in biochemistry and joined the Navy. And I had it in my mind. I was going to live a life of adventure. I saw myself on the bow of a destroyer with the salt water in my face and a pipe in my mouth, and I'd even grow a little bit of a beard, and then I'd go to exotic places and meet exotic people, and then I'd write about it. I'd be the new Jack London. Hell, I'd be Hemingway, let alone Jack London, and that's what I would do. Now that was all wonderful, except I really became cognizant of what I had done on this train leaving Grand Central Station for Great Lakes, Illinois. And somewhere in Pennsylvania, I said to this Navy chief, I said, I made a mistake. I have a paper due back at school, and I don't think I belong here. And he said, you're in the Navy, son. You are in the Navy. And he was right. And I ended up in Great Lakes Naval Station in boot camp, and it was truly a culture shock. I will tell you, they shaved my head, and they wanted me to make a bed. And I told them, I have sisters. My sister Catherine makes my bed. He was not impressed. And so there I was in Navy boot camp. And one of the things they do, and as everyone's been in the service knows, the first thing they do is they give you tests. And boy, I'll tell you, written tests. I am good at written tests. I'm terrible at life, but I'm good at written tests. And I take this battery of tests, and I get called into this commander's office, and he tells me, your testing is very high, and you come from a great background. You're almost a graduate of an Ivy League school. And we have a new program in nuclear weapons technology. We'd like to train you as a guided missile specialist, send you to Albuquerque, New Mexico, to Sandia Corporation and receive this sophisticated electronic training. And boy, that sounded exciting. I mean, if you've got to be in the Navy, this is exciting. And then they gave me psychological testing and rescinded their offer. And since I was on track to go to medical school, they said, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll make you a Navy corpsman. And they sent me to Navy Hospital Corps School, and I did very well and graduated at the top of that class. And there was a brand new program called Independent Duty Corpsman. It was actually the very first physician's assistant program at Bethesda Naval Medical Center, where they took corpsmen and gave them advanced medical training so that they could go into duty stations and ships that did not have doctors on them, and they would function as the physician on these ships. And it was a 2-year program, and I went through that program and became a PA. And they called me into this captain's office, and they said, you've done very well. We think you're a candidate to be commissioned in the Navy, so we want to send you to OCS at Newport, Rhode Island. And I said, well, that sounded great. And I said, that's wonderful. And they said, we'll give you 30 days leave and $500 to buy new uniforms. That was not a good combination, turned out. I ended up in Boston on the 29th day with no uniforms and no money, and called my family once again. This time they sent one of my brother-in-laws up to Boston with the money to buy the uniforms and deposit me to Newport, Rhode Island, to OCS, and I did. And that's a controlled environment, so anytime I'm in a controlled environment, I do very well. And I did well in OCS, and I graduated from OCS and was commissioned an ensign in the United States Navy, an officer and a gentleman by act of Congress, and then attached to my God, the Marine Corps. Again, I thought this was a terrible mistake, but I got sent to the 3rd Marine Division on Okinawa as a medical administrative officer, and I mean, the Marines, good grief, I mean, really. And, you know, I didn't even want to be in the Navy, let alone the Marine. And I ended up in Okinawa, reported into the 3rd Marine Division, and they couldn't quite find a billet for me or a job for me to do right away, so they stuck me in this officers' club on the northern end of Okinawa and forgot about me. And I forgot about them. Feeling was mutual. I'd get up every day at noon, report to the cocktail lounge in the officers' club for duty. And I would drink Haig and Haig Pinch, good scotch. Some of you new young people don't understand that. It's not Boone's Farm. And we would drink it at $1 a pop. I mean, you can't beat that. That's really okay. And that's what I would do, and nobody bothered me. And pretty soon they put another guy up there. He was a surgeon out of Temple University, and he was a drunk, and they did not want him around patients anymore. And they stuck him up in that officers' club, and he and I bonded. We became brothers, and we both kind of forgot we were in the military, and they forgot about us. We grew our hair long, grew beards, wore shorts and sandals, and kind of lost our uniforms after a while. Didn't know where the hell they went. It was kind of gone. And we would drink all day in the Oak Club and then go out at night to Naha, these different places in Okinawa. And finally, one fateful day, this Marine second lieutenant came over to this officers' club looking for us. And he found us, and he informed us that the regimental commander of the 5th Marines, this bird colonel, was having a dinner party in which all officers in his command had to attend. This made us very nervous. Very nervous. So we had to shave and get a haircut and get uniforms and show up to the colonel's dinner party, and we did. And there were tables all around this room, very, very, very nice environment, and the ambiance was lovely. And we sat near the door at this small table because our entire MO was not to be noticed, ever, by anybody in the military. We'd prefer they never knew our names, if it were possible. And at one point, we saw the colonel look around this room, and I could see his eyes locked right on us. And I thought, this is not good. This is not good. And he sent this major over to bring us over to him. And when we would get over to him, he said, what do they do? And the major said, I don't know. He said, one of them's a doctor. I don't know what the hell the other guy does. And the colonel said, give them a job. So, we were put in charge of venereal disease control on the island of Okinawa. That's what we did. And what that consisted of is these Marines would get gonorrhea and syphilis, and they'd get exotic disease that was clinically extinct. How the hell they would get it? They would get, they got a bug called lymphogranuloma venereum, which went out in the Middle Ages. You only saw the damn thing in textbooks. And then Marines were the only two places it ever existed. And I used to think, where'd you get this stuff? Christ, stay away. Don't go back there, ever. And our job was to go out into the villages, to the bars where these young ladies were, and find them and make sure they got treated so they could not continue this good cheer. So, consequently, what we did is we rode around Okinawa all day in a Jeep from bar to bar. And essentially drank for free. Because they knew why we were there, and we could shut them down, so they set up the scotch, and that's what we did. And so that's what we did, and our tour of duty came up, and we came back to the United States, and he went back to Temple, where today he's a cardiovascular surgeon in Philadelphia. And he's not yet been to AA. But you know what? I don't think he ever needed to go, and that's a whole other story, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But I went back up to Cornell, and I got admitted for that last semester and got my undergrad degree, and spent that summer in Meridian, Mississippi as a freedom rider, drunk, which was not a good thing to do in Meridian, Mississippi, in 1963, but that's what I did. And got back and got my degree, and got rejected at medical school because I had social problems. And that I should go out in the world and work for a year or two and then maybe reapply. And I was confused and at loose ends, and I didn't know what to do next. And whenever I'm confused, I get married. Is what I do. I've always found that as an answer to confusion. And I've done it several times, as a matter of fact. To give you an example, my family they are well-adjusted, and my sisters are all married to the same spouse forever, and their children are married to the same spouse. Nobody gets divorced in our family. As far as anybody can track back in the entire history of our family, there have been 4 divorces. 3 of them are mine. So that gives you a sense of, where I am in relationship to my family. And so, anyway, that's what happened. I got married. I married a girl that I had known in the Navy, a Navy nurse, and it was a bad match, to say that is a charitable definition of that union. We should never have had a second date. I don't know have you been on many, those? So if you find somebody completely incompatible, go marry them, is what I say. And that's what we did. And she immediately got pregnant, and we moved to Southern California ostensibly because I would be accepted and going to medical school at USC. And we moved in with her parents in Orange County. And I needed a stopgap job for the summer, and I got a job as a bartender, which was dreadful, as you well might imagine. I ended up coming in 3 o'clock in the morning, drunk and half-dressed, and you know how that goes. And my new in-laws did not like that, as you can imagine, and my wife didn't like it, and she decided this was over, and they decided it was over. They threw me out, and I found myself in Santa Ana on one of the main avenues in Orange County with a lot of Samsonite luggage and no money. And I needed a job for the rest of the summer, so I got a job as an ambulance driver in Orange County, California, and I'm a blackout drinker, so the ambulance calls, some of them were really quite colorful. I would come out of a blackout with the lights and the siren going, and I wouldn't know where the hell we were. I'd have to say to my guy with me, where are we going? Which is really, he would get unnerved. And crowning glory to that career was one night in Newport Beach. I found myself coming out of a blackout, going slowly in a cul-de-sac in a circle, with all the lights on, and going into people's bedroom windows, and they're all coming out on the porch in their pajamas. And watch this ambulance slowly go around the circle. You know how you can't get out of something when you lock on it? You can't. You don't understand that. You can't do. And finally, they sent a police car in the cul-de-sac to lead me out. And that's what they did. And I lost my job. And I lost my driver's license forever in the state of California. And that's the package that I brought to Alcoholics Anonymous. That's who I was when I got here. And as I told you in the beginning, a new profession had opened up in civilian medicine, the physician's assistant program. And I became the third licensed PA in the state of California, sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I went to work in an emergency room in East Los Angeles. Nights. And you're right, that was really quite a place. It was exciting. I was the night guy in that ER, and I triaged it, and I referred to specialists, and I did the primary care, and I had nurses and working for me, and lab. It was just, boy, it was popping. Things were going on. But I had not taken these steps. And there was no spiritual program. And I met another girl, beautiful girl, a daughter of a longtime sober AA member, and we fell in love, and we got married. And she went to Al-Anon. We were very cute, is what we were. I was in on the ground floor of a new profession, and she was beautiful, and I was in an AA, and she was in Al-Anon, and it was all going to be so wonderful, except nobody had a program. Nobody had taken these steps. And I would end up in that emergency room at night, and I would end up depressed and overcome with anxiety, and that terrible feeling that you and I know about when you're dry and you're not sober, of not being up to the task, of those kind of emotions. And I don't have a program, but I have an excellent medical education, so I know how to deal with depression. Dexedrine works best. 15 milligrams Spantrols work better than anything. And by the time I was through with those, I was taking 5 or 6 of them a day. Now, anyone that knows anything about amphetamine abuse will understand. That's got you zipping right along, boy, I'll tell you. Whatever you're doing, it will be in a hurry. Problem with that is, long about the 4th or 5th day when you've not slept nor eaten, and your eyes are dilated out over here like that, and your hair stands up on end, and you always look like you've just witnessed an axe murder. How you perpetually look. Yeah. And then you show up in the emergency room to help the sick. And the guy you're relieving never wants to go home. And he's always saying things like, Vince, get something to eat. You need sleep. And the answer to that is a drug called Demerol. And you all know about Demerol, don't you? And it's not a narcotic. I bet you think it is, but you're wrong. It's a synthetic. Don't worry about it, though. It's not. It's an academic issue. And I'm going to talk about this because this is Alcoholics Anonymous, and we need to mention this. Alcoholism and narcotic addiction are different. They are not the same. I don't care what any counselor told you or any therapist. Be clear. They're different. And the difference is this. Narcotics are addictive. They all come from opium. Heroin, morphine, Dilaudid. They're addictive. Period. Psychologically and physiologically for everyone that injects them intravenously. They are addictive. You don't need to worry about whether you have an addictive personality even. You just need a syringe and a needle. And they are addictive. That is not true with alcohol. Turns out that 9 out of 10 people who drink alcohol do it with impunity. They're not like us. They don't ever end up in AA. We represent only 1 out of 10. The other 9 are social drinkers. I don't understand them. But that's who they are. They say things like, No more for me. I'm driving. Or I'd love to have another, but my wife's waiting dinner. I'm going home. Really? Not me. I'm going to Las Vegas. So are you. But that's the way. On the other hand, I've never met a social heroin user. So I think that's the difference. And that's just now. There are many people here that have drugs in their life. I don't think in Alcoholics Anonymous today, if we told people who would use drugs they couldn't be in AA, you'd have a real small banquet here. I will tell you. That's not true today. But to function in Alcoholics Anonymous, you must be an alcoholic. You must be an alcoholic. Whatever else you did is kind of like an added benefit. But you must be an alcoholic to function in Alcoholics Anonymous. So having said that, the other problem with Demerol is people care about where it is. I mean, they really, they come in the morning and open the narcotic drawer, and all the dope is gone. And they say things like, Vince, where's the Demerol? And I'd have to tell them, I don't know. And here a minute ago. And the people who care the most about Demerol are the people on the Medical Quality Assurance Board of the state of California. You hear in AA, we care? They care. I will tell you. They came in there in the middle of the night one Thursday evening and put me under arrest, which in those days there were no diversion programs or programs for impaired physicians. That was, I'll tell you, that came much later. The only program in those days was the LA County Jail. That was the diversion program. And they placed me under arrest and took me out of that emergency room right in my green scrub suit. Downtown we went and charged me with a felony appropriating narcotics for my own use. It was subsequently reduced to a misdemeanor. But I lost my medical license and ended up spending the summer of 1972 living in an apartment by the flight path in LAX, runway 2, drinking 1/2 gallon of vodka a day. That's how I spent the summer of 1972. And I don't have to explain that kind of drinking to anybody in this room. You know all about that, don't you? You drink 1/2 gallon of vodka a day, you're an alcoholic. You are not a social drinker. I say that unequivocally. People who drink 1/2 gallon of vodka a day have the same experience. It's axiomatic. You vomit bile, and you're in and out of blackouts, and you don't know what. If you look at a clock, and it says 9 o'clock, is that AM or PM? And if you're like me, you lose 30 pounds over that summer, and of course she's gone. And when they go for me, they take everything. I mean, everything else is gone along with her. And I find myself in this dreadful apartment, and I have very little money, but I have enough money to go over to the supermarket every morning and buy 1/2 gallon of vodka out of the wire basket by the cash register, the supermarket brand vodka, really good stuff. Premium stuff for $7 1/2 gallon or whatever the hell it was in 1972. Take it back to that terrible apartment and sit in the middle of the living room floor and drink it in a Turkish bathrobe. And that's how I spent that summer. And in early September of that year, I came out of a blackout in Newport Beach, California. And I don't even remember how I got there, except to this day, I can't tell you how I got to Newport Beach that day. But I came out of a blackout sitting on a park bench right by the Pacific Ocean on the Balboa Peninsula in a 3-piece wool suit and a white shirt and tie. I have no idea why I was dressed like that, with some luggage next to me and some money in my pocket, not much, and I knew I needed a job, and I managed to get a local newspaper, an Orange County newspaper, and I looked through the classified ads and found a job as an apprentice embalmer for a mortician. That's on my medical license. That's all I could do. I mean, I had no. So I went to work for this undertaker, and it was just oh God, if you need a job, do not do that. It was just dreadful. I mean, the guy was a ghoul. I mean, he was just, it was awful. And the job paid $80 a week, and a fringe benefit was this a bachelor apartment over the room where they kept the caskets. And the only entrance in and out, you had to walk through this casket room. Have you ever tried that with a hangover? Boy, I'll tell you, it would set you free. And they'd play chimes with birds chirping in the morning, and and these open caskets. It would just set you free. And I got in an argument with him, and I got drunk and stole his hearse. And on September the 20th, 1972, I came out of what I hope is my last blackout, driving the wrong way on Pacific Coast Highway in Newport Beach in a stolen hearse with a young lady sitting next to me who I did not recall meeting, oddly enough, who was screaming at the top of her lungs. And I remember thinking, I really, there's something about me that I am predisposed to get involved with these neurotic women. I told her, I said, you really are unbalanced. You should get some counseling. Because all the women in my life end up like this. They end up screaming and running off into the night. And I don't know why. I'm not a violent man. Trust me, I would never. But for some reason, they get afraid. And that was September. That's the way I would have when I was drinking, if you dated me, it would start out with such promise. It was really going to be a great evening. Somewhere after midnight, though, I was going to look at you, and you were going to have your eye makeup coming down your face, and you have this look of disappointment and terror on your face. And I always knew then the date was over. You can't fool me. And I remember that's the way this girl looked, and 6 o'clock in the morning on Pacific Coast Highway in Newport Beach, and that was September the 20th, 1972. I have not had a drink of alcohol or used any mood-altering chemical whatsoever from that date to this. But what happened to me is truly amazing. If you could have materialized in the back of that hearse and foretold my future, what you would have told me would have been remarkable. You would have said, you're going back to Alcoholics Anonymous today, and your experience in Alcoholics Anonymous is going to be completely different. And it's going to be completely different because for the first time in your life, you're going to be desperate. Desperate enough to take actions you don't agree with and direction from people you do not like. And as a result of that, something wonderful will happen to you. You're going to get a measure of recovery. You're going to get better. I would have told you that's preposterous. If you would have asked me that day, I was perfectly willing to admit that my life was absolutely chaos. And I would also be willing to admit to you that I had no idea what was good for me. The jury was in on that. And there was no argument with that. But if you would have told me your answer is Alcoholics Anonymous, I would have said, oh, that's too bad. That's too bad. I've been to AA. And AA doesn't work for me. I could see where it would work for you. No. If you're uneducated and Protestant. Doesn't work for me. But where did I go? I went to the Costa Mesa Alano Club in Costa Mesa, California. And you want to know why? Because I thought AA would work? No. Because I didn't have anywhere else to go. And that's the only way I've ever gotten recovery here, is when every other possibility was exhausted, when there was no other door to open, where there's no friendly direction to go, where there's no one wanting to talk to me, I then become teachable. I will begin to listen to you then. And I went to the Costa Mesa Alano Club, which is a dreadful Alano club in Costa Mesa, California. It is awful. It's just a, bunch of out-of-work Texans hanging around there. They had an AA meeting there that noon. It was terrible, and I didn't like it, but I had nowhere else to go. And that night they had another meeting, and the manager let me sleep on the sofa. And the next day I got some money together and rented a room in Costa Mesa, California for $11 a week. Can you imagine what that was like? You'll be correct. Those rooms are generic, aren't they? And I remember moving in there thinking, my God, this is a disgusting hovel. I don't think I could. I would clearly have to be here a few weeks till I can get something together, because I didn't talk to my family by then. I mean, I needed to, so I have to stay here for a couple of weeks. I don't think I could stay here that long. 2 years later, when I moved out of that room, my perspective had changed. Amazing things had happened to me. First of all, if you would have asked me, my first 2 years of sobriety were spent in Orange County, in the Newport Beach area. And they were, on the outside, they were terrible. I mean, I had a terrible time. If you would have asked me how I was doing at any point during that 2 year period of time, I would tell you terrible, awful, just awful. I lost jobs, I lost a job as a gas station attendant for being incompetent. You think that's easy? I lost a job as a $1.87 an hour drill press operator. Which this job was, you came in and sat on a stool, and they had this handle you pulled. And they had these copper plates, and you would take this copper plate and put it here and pull the handle, and the drill would put a hole in the middle of the copper plate. You would then take the copper plate and place it over here. That's it. That's a job. I managed to put the hole in the wrong place on about 800 of these copper plates one day. And the foreman of this machine shop, who was from Dallas, said to me, son, they always call you son, we got to let you go. He said, too bad, I can see you're a real trier. He said, you're just not quite bright enough to do this kind of work. And I said, bright enough. I said, you redneck moron. I said, bright enough? I'm a graduate of Cornell University. You never say that to these guys. They're country slick. He said, I'll tell you what, boy, you ought to go on back there and take the course in drill press operating. He was right. And I remember that day was in early 1973, the winter of 1973. It was pouring rain, and I remember leaving that dreadful machine shop and walking back to this terrible room that I lived in, and I had bronchitis and I was coughing, and I just really, I had no medical insurance and no money, and I thought, how did the incongruity of my life, how does this happen? How do you go from where I was to get here? And some mail had caught up with me, and one was a letter from a physician in upstate New York, right up here in Syracuse, I think, as a matter of fact, and he was inviting me to join a committee for my college class reunion. Yeah. I mean, how do you answer that letter? I can't make it this year, Dr. Medoff. I've just lost my job as a drill press operator. You can't go from where I was to here. The incongruity is beyond words. It's unimaginable. And that was where I was. And that night I went to a meeting on the Balboa Peninsula, a big speaker meeting and the speaker that night was somebody Pat mentioned earlier today, maybe the quintessential speaker in Alcoholics Anonymous, a man named Norm Alpe. And I see there's no reaction. I'm really getting old. Nobody remembers Norm. This guy was, he was infectious. He was a Mr. Everyman. If Frank Capra made a movie about AA, Norm Alpe would be the speaker. And Jimmy Stewart would play him. Okay? He was just a regular guy that had this wonderful story about how he was a bad drunk and his wife was terrified of him, and then he got sober, and his wife was terrified of him, and he had a bunch of daughters and they were all afraid of him, and he got sober in AA, and he got his life back and he got his family back, and He talked about taking those daughters who were afraid of him, that they now loved him, and he took them downtown and bought them prom dresses, and it was just married them off to jerks. And 400 people in the church and for the wedding, and they were all AAs. I mean, it was a wonderful, wonderful talk. And he could not fail to inspire you. But he did not. I listened to him, and I thought, my case is different. This can't happen for me. It can't happen for me. And I went back to that terrible room, and I was still sick, and I had a fever, and I had bronchitis. And I went into this terrible room, and I was so desperate. I did something so stupid. So stupid. I can't believe I did it. I got on my knees beside the bed in that room and said a desperate prayer. God, please help me, because I'm afraid and I'm alone and I don't think I can make it anymore. That is the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous for me. That night and that prayer, it was unsophisticated. It was simply a plea for help. And if you're new tonight and you want to know where you start, that's a good place. That is a good place. And you don't need to believe in that God or have any faith in that belief. The great thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is we don't care what you believe, we don't care what you think, we don't care what you feel. We only care about what you do. And if you're willing to take the action, you get better here. Actions you don't believe in and that you don't agree with. But I said that prayer, and I'd like to tell you that things got better automatically. Right away, they didn't. I went back to that club the next day, and there was another guy sober about 10 years around that club. He was from Texas also, but his name was Clarence. And Clarence was in the floor covering business. He would go sell floor covering to the rich people in Newport Beach, and then he'd run to the manufacturer, and he'd get it and run down and install it. A one-man, you've seen these AA entrepreneurs before, one-man operation. And he offered me a job as his gopher. He said, I'll pay you $10 a day and provide your meals. It sounded like the presidency of General Motors to me. I mean, my overhead was low. So I went to work for Clarence, and I was his gopher. I carried the tools, and I continued to go to meetings every night, and I continued this prayer, and I finally developed some kind of a contact with God, one that I had deserted a long time ago. And I finally developed that contact again, and it was a tenuous contact at best in the beginning. It was simply a prayer for help and then a prayer for thanks, a thank you prayer. And I think there are maybe 2 or 3 kinds of prayers that are still applicable to me today. There is thank you, and I say that a lot these days, a prayer of gratitude. There's a prayer of help me. I say that a lot too. And there's also a prayer called use me. Use me. Use me to do your will. And I try to do that. But in those days, I was just developing that idea and that concept. And so I went to work for Clarence, and I was his gopher, and I began to acquire some material possessions. I got a car, a 1964 red Chevrolet convertible with a hole in the top and no brakes. And I used to drive that down to the big fancy meeting in Newport Beach where all of the rich people tied up their yachts and went into the meeting. I'd pull that baby into the parking lot, and they'd all immediately get into their Mercedes and BMWs and put them on the other side of the lot. They were always asking me questions like, do you have insurance on that car? I hadn't had a driver's license in 3 years. Why the hell would I have insurance? It's a redundancy. An absolute redundancy. And that's the way that I functioned in my first 2 years of sobriety. And, and then when I was 2 years sober, I realized I needed to do something very drastic. I really needed to get a real sponsor. And I had put it off, and I don't recommend that if you're new, but I put it off because I knew who the sponsor had to be. I didn't like the idea. I didn't like this guy. He was a big speaker in AA, and he had this, whenever he spoke somewhere, he carried this crowd of people with him, and they got his coffee and saved his, oh man, it was just, And he was a crazy maniac. I mean, you should have heard this guy 35 years ago. He was, he was a lunatic, it seemed to me. But he had this, but he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And he had this indisputable capacity for helping losers in Alcoholics Anonymous. People who not necessarily losers, but people who didn't have focus. And that was my problem. I had no focus. I could pray, and I had begun to feel the spirit of Alcoholics Anonymous for the first time ever in that 2-year period. I remember the very first time, the very first spiritual experience was working with Clarence and eating dinner, and he gave me some money, and it was a June day, and the sun was setting over the Pacific. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's absolutely spectacular. And I was walking along the pier on Balboa Island, and I got a frozen banana. I was eating that frozen banana, I was watching the sunset, and I thought, I have nothing to feel good about. My life is chaos. I've lost my profession. I'm working for a carpet layer from Texas for $10 a day. And yet something had happened to me. Something had happened to me. I had felt a presence that somehow I was going to be all right, and that God was watching over me. And I couldn't have articulated all of that then. I just knew that somehow I was going to be all right. And those kinds of experiences followed me along. Whenever I needed them, I'd seem to get one. And that's what happened to me in my first couple of years of sobriety. But when I was 2 years sober, I had to get this guy for a sponsor. And I didn't, boy, I'll tell you, I asked him to help me. He said, well, he ran this mission on Skid Row in Los Angeles, and I should take my car and drive down there and have lunch with him. So I drove this beat-up old Chevy down to the Midnight Mission on Skid Row in Los Angeles and parked it in front and went inside and met with this guy. And I asked him to help me. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, I will help you if you can accept the very simple proposition that your best judgment about your life is terrible, and that my judgment about your life is infinitely better than yours. And if you will do everything I suggest you do without debate, that was important, I will help you. And I was just desperate enough that day to make that unholy pact with the devil. I agreed to do that. And the first thing he said to me, do you have insurance on that car? And I said, no. He said, you don't have a driver's license. I said, no. He said, give me the keys. I said, give you the keys? That's the only thing I have in the world is my car. He said, yeah, now you're going to give it to me. I'm going to take it and park it in front of my house in Venice by the beach. And when you get a driver's license and you get a job and you can afford insurance, I'll give you the keys back. Until then, you can come and visit your car at my house. Every Saturday morning, we play baseball across the street and volleyball in my backyard, and we cook hot dogs and we have lunch, and you can come see your car. And in the meantime, I want you to move into this mission on Skid Row and live here. Live here? You don't understand. I live in Newport Beach. I'm looking for upward mobility. He said, well, you said you'd do what I told you to do. Now I want you to move into this mission and live here. And every morning I want you to come down to my office. I'm going to be here. I'm going to give you $8. And I want you to go outside and get on the bus that runs up Wilshire Boulevard. Put on your 3-piece suit. And when you get on the bus, ask the driver for some transfers so you don't waste a lot of money getting on and off the bus. And every time you come to a medical practice between downtown Los Angeles and the San Fernando Valley, I want you to go in and talk to the administrators and tell them that you're sober for 2 years in Alcoholics Anonymous and that you drink or use drugs and you need help getting your medical license back and you need a job. I said, that's the most ridiculous. I could have thought of that. That's stupid. That's what I thought. What I said was, okay. So I didn't have a better idea. So I moved into that mission on Skid Row, and I lived there for 8 months. Can you imagine that? And I did everything he said. I would get on that bus, and everybody told me, well, we'd like to help you, but there's nothing we can do for you. And I did that religiously, what he told me to do. And on Saturdays, I'd take the bus up to his house, and I'd visit my car. I don't know if you've ever parked a car near the beach in Venice, California, but it started to decompose. One day, the top was gone. Somebody took the top off my car. And all of these guys that were around that would play softball, these other guys who were fairly new, they'd gather around my car. And they'd say, hey, look at Vince's car. The top is gone. And they'd all laugh. I didn't think it was funny, but they did. And then one other Saturday I got up there and one of the wheels was gone. Have you ever? It sat on 3 wheels like that, you know. It was very sad. And then one Saturday the entire steering column was gone. Who the hell would want a steering column out of a 1964 Chevrolet? Yeah. And then finally one day there was nothing but an oil spot. Which was a metaphor for my life. Wasn't it? I mean, that was nothing there but an oil spot. But I did what he said. I lived in that mission. One day in June of 1975, on a Friday morning, I went outside to get on that bus because I didn't do what he said one more day. And I had on my pinstripe suit, and the first thing I did was I sat down and chewing gum all over the back of my suit. And it was a disgusting mess, and I was depressed, and I knew this. And I thought, God, I get off the bus at a gas station halfway up Wilshire Boulevard, went in the men's room to try to wipe the gum off my trousers with wet paper towels. Have you ever tried that? Ran down the legs and just, you know. And I was so depressing, and I just thought, I can't do it anymore. I continued to pray. I think I had taken the first 3 steps. I know I have taken the first 3 steps. But there's nothing. How is this going to... I can't go on anymore. I mean, I live in a mission on Skid Row. I'm a graduate of an Ivy League university. I have no job, no car. I'm the most grotesque human being you've ever met. Everybody in AA was doing better than me. How can that be? And the only thing I can do today if I don't drink is maybe I can sit in a movie. And if I sit in the movies, maybe I won't drink. And I rode the bus to the ocean, to the end of the line in Santa Monica, and I went through this cafeteria where you get a tray of food and you get your lunch and you set it down. I went outside to get a LA Times to read the sports section while I was eating my lunch, and the busboy came by and took the tray. Took my lunch. I mean, and I thought, God, there's nothing worse can happen today. And I walked from the ocean in Santa Monica over to the UCLA campus in Westwood and stood in line to buy a ticket to the movie. That's all I could do. And it was the Bruin Theater, and the movie was The Godfather 2. First run, just out. And I stood in line to buy a ticket, and I heard someone call my name. And I turned around and came face to face with the administrator of the medical center in which I had been arrested for taking Demerol. And he said, how in the world are you? He said, you look terrific. And I said, I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous for 2 years, in 8 months, actually, and I don't drink, and I certainly don't use any drugs. He says, when have you worked last? I said, I haven't worked in a long time. He said, that's really quite a coincidence because we have a urologist that's now in our group practice who's a member of the Medical Quality Assurance Board. And he's going to be in the clinic tomorrow. And he said, I'm just so happy to see you. He says, let's go down and I'll introduce you to him. We'll have lunch. Maybe he can write some letters or do something, help you get your license back. And if he can, how would you like to go back to work? In the very same emergency room. And I went down and I met that urologist, and within 60 days my medical license was restored in the state of California, and I went back to work in that very same emergency room. And I worked there for the next 2 years. Nights, and no drugs were missing. And the patients got good care. I know, because I gave it to them. And I took these steps, 1 through 12, precisely as our book instructs us to do that. And we talked this afternoon about that inventory, and it's a moral inventory I discovered. And if you're new, understand that. It's not designed to get you in touch with your feelings. Who cares? You know, I mean... That inventory is about your secrets. It's about what you're going to die with. It's about all of the small compromises you've made all of your life, and all of the people you secretly hate and feel have harmed you. That's what it's about. And I wrote that inventory, and I took it with that sponsor. And things began to happen for me. And I took these steps, all of them. And I paid money back. I was working in an emergency room, not allowed to have a checking account. Any medical professional you've ever seen was not allowed to have a checking account. Didn't have a car, didn't have a driver's license, had to go to work on a bus, get my paycheck, and go to this crazy sponsor's office. And we'd walk up to the bank and cash it and get money orders and start paying people I owed. And that's what we did. And I thought, he doesn't know anything. This guy, his office is a mess. He's got crap all over his desk. He's got coffee spilled all over. He's got people from all over the world calling him on the phone, and he's trying to work on my finances. And I used to tell him, you don't know what you're doing. And he would say, why don't you just shut up? I never had an answer for that. I'd like to be able to, and we would pay the bills. And I ended up getting back into my family. I made amends to my family. The one other major amend in my life, I should tell you, is very important. That pregnant wife that I had so very long ago had that little girl and surrendered her for adoption. And I was too drunk to do anything about it. So when I was 8 years sober, I hired a private investigator, and we found that girl. And I had an adoption psychologist call her and ask her if she was interested in speaking with me. And she was. And I flew to Florida, and I met her. And I was able to tell her that I was available. She was adopted by wonderful people and had a great life. But I was able to tell her that I was available to help her or be a part of her life in any way she saw fit. And I was able to help her financially by then. And now we have a relationship. We talk on the phone every week, and next month I'm going to see my grandchildren in Kansas City. And I'm going to see her and her family, and that is a result of Alcoholics Anonymous. I will tell you, if you're new, that there's a whole lot of things going on in AA today that are different. There's always, ever since I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous, there have been fads. There's always the new incarnation of pop psychology that's going to change everybody. And AAs will go for it. They'll go for fried ice cream. I will tell you. When I was new, everyone was walking around with a copy of The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, and that was the answer then. And then a few years later, everyone was sitting in coffee shops with giant jars of niacin, eating them like M&Ms and turning purple. And that was an answer in that incarnation. And then there was the self-actualization programs, EST and LifeSprings and Summit, and people would go, but they always came back to one thing: this spiritual program. This spiritual program. That it's about God. It's about a belief in God and a faith in God. And it's the latest thing I understand is the promise. Or promises, or whatever the hell it is. I don't know. But I saw some tape on it for a while. I could only watch it for about 20 minutes. And then I had to turn it off. It was only, there was some alcoholics talking about, some AA members talking about it. And it's about visualizing what you want, and then eventually you get it. Only in Alcoholics Anonymous can you find people who have spent 20 years admitting that they have absolutely no power over anything. Sitting in a room visualizing a Mercedes and manipulating the universe to give it to them. I don't know where else you could possibly find people who would do that. That's why you've got to love alcoholics. But that'll go away too. And it might be good for other people, but for us, this is it. It's just this. And sometimes the simplicity of it is deceiving, because the simplicity is so simple that we yearn to make it more complex than it really is. We spend so much time, sometimes I think, examining our lives that we forget to live them. It's like people with a video camera that memorialize an event perpetually. And then when the event is over and you say, well, what was it like? They say, I don't know, it was videoing it, and it's kind of the same thing here sometimes. It has been for me sometimes. I'm able to get seduced on occasion. But ultimately, it's about Alcoholics Anonymous. I am here to tell you tonight that I am married to the same woman for 26 and a half years. She's a very friendly girl, clearly. And, and I made some mistakes before that. In 1976, I met this cute little redhead. I met her in August, got married in September, and divorced in October. Last time I saw her, she was on the way back to her daddy's ranch in El Dorado, Texas. But Pat got sober, and I watched her take care of her husband while she got sober, and he did pass away, and we got to know each other, and we fell in love, and we got married, and I got to tell you how much I love my wife, more than I could possibly tell you, and more every day. Our marriage is better every day that I'm alive. And as she said, we've had our problems, never with each other. Never with each other. We're blessed. I hope you find your soulmate here. I found mine. And, we've had illness, and I've made a whole lot of money, and big homes, and German cars, and then I lost it and was broke, and had heart surgery and cancer, and oh, Jesus, but through it all, we loved each other, and we were surrounded by the people in Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon. And I want to tell you about Al-Anons. I had staph pneumonia from chemotherapy. I had to take chemotherapy for colon cancer. It was prophylactic. They operated and got it all, but we had to take it. And I didn't react well to it. I had a terrible time with it, and I caught staph pneumonia. And I spent February of 2004 in the City of Hope intensive care unit on 6 liters of oxygen. And that's, not good. Didn't look like I was going to make it, and clearly I did. I do 40 minutes on level 9 on the bike, so I breathe fine. But I would wake up in the middle of the night, but things were not good financially, and it seemed like I was dying, and Pat had to work. She was there every waking hour that she wasn't working, and she'd had to get some sleep so she could go to work. But I'd wake up in the middle of the night in the ICU afraid, and I would pray, and sometimes I would feel a little bit better. But I would look around, and all of a sudden I would see Al-Anons in the room. Al-Anons, they're taking care of me and making me drink Ensure. Have you ever had an Al-Anon come at you with a glass of Ensure? You'll drink it. That's right. And I got better, and things got better, and as you know from my story, I haven't been very successful with women until this one, and now it's paid off immensely. But I wish I knew some things that I know now. I wish I knew them then, when I was young and in my 20s. And if you're new and young and male here tonight, I can give you some great advice. Women are not the enemy. They are your loving, equal partners. And they are to be listened to and cherished, and they have 50% of say in everything. Some cases more. And I've understood that here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and if you know that, if you're new and young and male, you can save yourself years of untold grief. And I mean, you can have it all now. Thank you for inviting us.